Welcome to the MMA Vivisection. This time we are here for Bellator 162, Shlemenko versus Kendall Grove. Of all people, this is one of those fights. Somebody asked me yesterday what fights were going on this weekend. I was like, there's a Bellator card. It's got Bobby Lashley on it. And that was about all I could remember offhand. And so I like this Shlemenko Grove fight. This card, looking at it again, like there are a bunch of fighters I know on it. There's a bunch of fighters I'm interested in on it, but it totally is taking me by surprise. Absolutely, in terms of who's on it, it's gone way under the radar. People were talking about Baby Slice being off the card, and that was like the one thing that people have been talking about this week in terms of this card. Was Baby Slice's debut, and now its cancellation. I am joined by Eddie Mercado and Victor Rodriguez to break this card down. Vic, what are your thoughts on this Bellator fight card we got here?
Well, first off, to the guy that asked you about the fight, so the best way you could have put it was, hey, you ever see a real-life G.I. Joe fight? Have you ever seen one of those things walking around? No? Okay, well, imagine one actually fighting, like doing karate and stuff in a steel cage. Other than that, we have the mystery of how Shlemenko was able to still return to fighting in the U.S. and somehow taking on Kendall Grove, which seems like a much more random matchup than it should be. But other than that, some surprisingly decent matchups and some pretty good talents here to look out for. I don't know. Just get ready for a lot of weird, because this seems like one of those cards that it does have some legitimacy on it, but there is some potential for some pretty strange mishaps taking place.
Eddie, how about you? You excited for this card?
I don't know if I would say excited. I don't think that's the appropriate word. I'm gonna watch, and I think Vic hit the nail on the head with get ready for a whole lot of weird. I think there's something odd in just about each one of these fights for me. Not necessarily in a bad way, just weird and odd and different. But like I'm intrigued, and there's 4 heavyweight fights on the card, which is, that's A-okay with me. Alexander Shlemenko's returning, so that's a huge question mark. He's coming off of a suspension. He's been fighting over in Russia, so who knows what he's doing. He's fighting Kendall Grove, which is who knows what he's doing. So a whole lot of who knows. And Hisaki Katoh, who knows anything about that guy? Like, I've seen him fight 4 times and know nothing about him.
He's a traditional karate dude, master of Katoh.
Yeah.
He's got it going on. He's now beat Joe Schilling twice now.
Yeah, man, he's sleeping fools.
Beating them ugly too. That's the worst part.
Yeah, that kickboxing win over Joe Schilling, man. I'd feel a little sorry for Joe if I had reason to feel sorry for Joe.
Right? Yeah. He just.
This is why he hates you.
Must be. So one of the things that's a little, I don't know if it's not necessarily, I don't know. It's a continued thing that Bellator seems to be doing, and I'm not sure why. Is for some reason Julia Budd is like sunk down in the middle of the prelims. Like maybe she'll get a bump up because they've only got 4 fights on the main card, but like I don't really know what she's doing down on the prelims at this point. With something like Hisaki Katoh versus AJ Matthews or Goiti Yamauchi versus Ryan Couture on the main card. Those are both not bad fights, but
you can't place her above Katoh. Like, he's nothing but action. You can't do that.
It's true, but Bud's actually somebody like who they're still trying to build towards that Conan Bud. Or Bud versus now, what's her name?
Alexis Dufresne
fight. Like, Bud is your next title challenger, basically.
Yeah, I think the greater question becomes whether or not this is a sign of them not having as much faith in the women's divisions that they've implemented, or I don't understand why. Because if you remember that the Kunin fight that she wound up losing, that also ended up on the undercard. or actually it was slated for the undercard, and due to some other, I guess some fight fell through, or there was some injury or something like
The
that.
Conan fight ended up
It
not
ended up
happening.
on. It ended up being Kuna's last fight. That ended up being on TV though.
Yeah,
Right,
but,
yes.
I thought you meant Bud Conan.
Yeah, exactly. That one fell apart, and then Kunin ended up fighting Dufresne, and then that's how that happened.
And
But
that fight ended up being on
and I don't understand. Like it would not have been on TV otherwise. And what we keep hearing from Bellator is, well, we're trying to expand the online property. Well, I'm not sure why. It's not a paid service. I'm not sure why you're trying to entice more people to watch something online. Is it an ad revenue thing? You have a TV property. But, I mean, again, I don't know. I guess they have the reasons, but it is much more egregious when it comes to some of these women's fights, especially someone like Bud or Kunin, who have a degree of legitimacy. They have a career trajectory behind them. They're known for being two of the most talented featherweights out there that aren't under the Invicta or UFC banner. So I don't get it. I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to why that is. But, again, barring some sort of crazy event between now and the and fight night or fight time, it's going to probably stay on the prelims still. And it's a shame too, because this looks like it might be a pretty decent fight either way.
Well, it's just one of, like, I don't know how you end up putting a title around somebody's waist if you're burying them on an online streaming.
Yeah, this is true, and this is sort of the problem that the UFC had at some point with the featherweight division when they were starting to build it up. We saw John Moraga fight on Facebook twice.
Flyweight, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, flyweight. We saw him fighting twice online, and then when it came for the time for him to fight for the title, it's like, why should I care? No one has ever really seen him either on TV or any of these properties that attract a larger audience. Well, you're doing the same thing, and in a way, whether or not you agree that it devalues the title, it takes a lot of shine off of something that you could really monetize, and they're choosing not to do that with people that deserve better.
Yeah, not only that, but look at this card specifically. I mean, Baby Slice was on this card, so of course that would be above the Julia Budd fight, right? I mean, the name value alone, and it makes me wonder if Ryan Couture carries any name value.
Not at this point.
Yeah.
Well, they do have still a great degree of faith in Yamauchi too.
Yeah.
So I mean that, along with the Couture, that like I can see them trying to get some squeeze out of that. But
there are guys that you're trying to put forward, but it's just the only reason that at this point that Bellator has women's MMA fights seems like kind of a show, like a sideshow showcase to attract fans. Like they're not putting on a whole bunch of women's bouts and building deep divisions. So if the whole point of having these fights is like a showcase, side attraction, then why bury them? Like,
yes, exactly. And not even, and as you mentioned, they're pretty much, just past the middle point of the prelims. You still have Steve Garcia fighting after them.
Yeah.
They're not even headlining the preliminary portion of this card. And, again, this isn't like the UFC where, they have to put some of the bigger fights. They have to spread the wealth on Fight Pass and on Fox, whatever Fox network that the prelims are on that day, because they're trying to throw a bone to their distribution partners. They're not dumb. Fox isn't just going to take every little rinky-dink fight. They're not going to have, Ron Stallings versus a new guy that you just signed and then not have any stars. They're going to have some distribution of talent there because they have to. Bellator doesn't have that. They're not at that point yet. So I don't understand why they're doing that first. It just doesn't really make any sense.
All that said, the prelim card in general on this is a little odd in that it's got a lot of very good records on guys that are really not on many people's radars.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dudes, like there's 12-1 Grady Hurley, who's a 12-1 light heavyweight, and I have heard nothing about this dude. Like I've never seen him fight. I've never heard anyone talking about like, this dude. He started his career back in 2001, and took like 10 years off in the middle of it. So,
and his nickname is Sue. I mean, that stands out.
It does. And there's Jaleel Willis, who's 6-0, fighting 6-0 Omar Johnson, and Tyler Hill, 6-0, fighting 10-1 Wade Johnson. Some vets like Virgil Zwicker versus Dan Charles, and Chase Gormley versus Bobby Brent. There's a lot of like either weird, decent records or notable kind of guys that we've seen in other promotions at random on the undercard, without a lot of fights that are still Like there's still very few fights where I'm like, oh no, that's a meaningful, interesting fight where I really expect something big out of this kid.
It might make for some competitive matchups, to say the least.
Oh yeah, sure.
So.
Yeah, it does, but it also somehow speaks to what the infrastructure is like in the Southeast region. I mean, you have to remember this event is in Memphis, and the Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, that entire area. It's almost as incestuous as like the Jersey, Connecticut. There's a series of guys with these really odd records, and they fight really good opposition. And yet still you've never heard of them. You're like, well, where's this guy's come up? When's that going to happen? So you're seeing a bit of that here, only with perhaps lesser guys moving on to bigger organizations at that same pace.
So I'm going to read some odds for a couple of the fights on the undercard that we're not going to be covering. We're going to jump straight up to Julia Budd versus Arlene Blencowe.
Yeah.
But first, Bobby Brent is the underdog, plus 150 to plus 156 against Chase Gormley at minus 190 to minus 184. And Virgil Zwicker is the underdog, plus 135 to plus 141 against Dan Charles at minus 175 to minus 169.
Well, I'll say this. I agree with those odds on the Dan Charles fight. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like some like backroom bet on whether or not it ends in disqualification.
These are both heavyweight bouts. We're talking Bellator prelim heavyweight bouts. If you are gambling on these, check yourself into rehab. Find people that love you and care about you, because you are throwing your money into a big circle-shaped, it's not even an octagon, a big circle-shaped toilet.
Yeah, you need to go find the Bloody Elbow betting odds article, and at the very bottom, there's this 1-800 number. You should probably call it. It'll get you the help you need.
You should keep it on speed dial, because that's going to be a recurring problem if you're at that level, if that depth. I think that's probably the greatest service we provide here, and I think we might have mentioned this before on air. The best thing we can do for you folks, if you're gambling out there, is tell you what the hell not to bet on. That's guaranteed. And
do not bet on Bellator prelim heavyweight fights, please.
Yeah.
Now, on that note, we're going to talk about Julia Budd versus Arlene Blencowe. Vic, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Well, Julia Budd, she's bounced around for a bit despite having only an 8-2 record. She's fought some decent opposition, and she's kind of changed up a lot of things with her style. And I guess maybe some of it's been related to a lot of the injuries that she suffered that have caused her to pull out of a couple of fights in the middle of her career. But she seems to be back on track to I feel like now she's really found her stride as a fighter. She had a couple of fights in Invicta against Molly Esses and Charmaine Tweet. She ended up having that fight, which wasn't very exciting, in Bellator against Gabrielle Holloway, the boxer. Then she was slated to fight Marloes Kunin. That fight got canceled due to injury. And, she's really adapted her wrestling very well. She still uses her range, not very fast or fleet on her feet, but she's at least finding where to keep her timing and everything, and sort of when to do the right thing, doing the right thing at the right time against the opponent, and playing to really work around their strengths. In this case, Blencowe is a fighter who's more of a kickboxer, really, and that really smells to me like this is going to be another one of those grinding fights. I don't think it's going to be very exciting. It seems to me like Bud is going to just try to do her best to mug her, press against the cage, tire her out, make her carry that weight, and then start grinding from the top, and hopefully work her way to a submission or something like that. Although Blencowe's definitely not a slouch on the ground, she certainly does have the ability to defend. It's just a matter of whether or not she'll be able to keep up with that pace, because it seems to me like she's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. All
right, Eddie, what's your pick here?
I mean, that's pretty spot on. You have to go with Julia Budd here. I mean, she has some momentum behind her. 6 straight victories. I mean, she was 2-2 in Strikeforce, 4-0 in Invicta, 2-0 in Bellator. I mean, what's not to like? Her only losses were Amanda Nunes, the current UFC women's bantamweight champion, and Ronda Rousey. So, I mean, she's good. She is definitely becoming a lot more rounded. Her grappling is definitely on point. But I really like her knees in the clinch. I think that's an underrated weapon of hers, and I think that might come into play here. On the other side, you got Blencowe, who's tough, and she looked really in shape. I don't know if you guys saw the weigh-ins. Both of them did. Both of them looked really good. But, man, Bud is just on a tear. It could be dangerous for her. If Bud loses this, we might have another 145er in the female division with Marlis Kunin, Alexis Dufresne, Blencowe, and then, Julia Budd. So that could get interesting. But I got to go with Bud on this. I mean, how can you not?
Well, Bud's just kind of a huge powerhouse. I mean, I remember I was at a local event up here, and because she trains out of Vancouver, and I saw her at this event, and all I remember thinking for like 10 minutes is like, who is this Amazonian woman stalking around this kid, like up at the cage, like, right ringside coaching fighters? I was like, that is Julia Budd. That's who that is. She's just like, massive, muscles rippling everywhere. She's just kind of a huge powerhouse, and that's been really the key to her success in MMA, is that not that many women can match her for size and physicality.
That's like the opposite of the reaction I had when I bumped into Eddie Alvarez at 133. But that's another story for another time. I'll tell that story eventually. It's a good one. I'm sure he'll appreciate it because he's a funny dude.
I'm sure he will.
No.
All right, so the odds on that fight, Bud is the favorite, heavy favorite, minus 513 to minus 540. Blencowe, the underdog, plus 360 to plus 387. I'm not saying that that's long odds on Julia Budd, but she's not a finisher in any way, shape, or form, and she's not actually a dominating wrestler. She's just a very controlling grinder. So that's probably too long odds in any fight for Julia Budd. In any time you're going into the cage with I need to just hold this person down for 15 minutes to win, like, you should never be that huge a favorite.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a little bit long, honestly, but
not like I still expect Bud to win, and she's got the name value behind her to bump the odds up. I get it, but I'm just saying she's not a finisher. She's not going to go out there and just knock this chick out or submit her. It's going to be a slow grind if she wins, and grinding fighters, they give lots of opportunities for their opponents to come back. After that, we've got, there's a bout between Steve Garcia versus Ronnie Lawrence that I don't care about. If one of you guys wants to try and convince me to care about that fight, you're welcome to it, but we don't have any odds for it.
It could be a while.
Using that time to take a drink, so no. After that, we have the last final prelim, Ricky Rainey versus Gilbert Smith, which we'll go ahead and talk about. We got odds for that one. And Eddie, what's your thoughts on this fight?
I think it's going to be it has the potential to be exciting. Ricky Rainey is, he's one of those guys with just this Muay Thai base, and he's going to come forward, kind of squared up with you, throwing hands, throwing knees. On the other side, you got Gilbert Smith, who's more of a power puncher, heavy hands. Both of them came up short in their last fights, like razor-thin decisions. Gilbert Smith fought Fernando Gonzalez, and those guys just knucked. I mean, it was cool. Gonzalez is about to fight MVP, actually. Yeah. And on the other side, Ricky Rainey, he lost a decision to Chidi Njokuani, which, I mean, he really had a spirited affair in that one. He really went for it. So hopefully these guys are going to just stand there and trade. Who's going to win? I think I like Ricky Rainey in this. I just like his moxie. He's just a little more gun-ho, I think. So I'm gonna give it to him.
All right. There's a lot of spirited affairs, moxie, and gung-ho in there, Vic. What linguistic specialties are you bringing to this breakdown?
I don't think you want to hear them. Let me tell you this. Ricky Rainey, as Eddie described, kind of a lankier striker, very much a durable athlete, and he is more calculated with his strikes than Gilbert Smith. Smith seems to have more of a not so much a wrestle boxer approach, but more like a grapple boxer approach, and he's very mindful of the takedown, but he's also trying to implement his jiu-jitsu. Problem is that it's not. It's very hit or miss. I don't know if there's a degree of focus or what it is, but at some points, he doesn't seem to integrate all of the aspects of MMA as well as perhaps he could. That gets him into a lot of trouble in a lot of these bouts. And I do also have to worry about his cardio. Sometimes it's good. Most often it is not. And the longer this fight goes on, the worse it's going to get for him. I don't know how he's going to deal with the reach disadvantage. I don't know how well he's going to do against Rainey, using a lot of those long strikes. And, oh, my goodness, Eddie, you can't do that. You can't bring that much cute all at once.
Oh, he's like harassing me. I have to. He won't stop unless I hold him.
You should you cute dog. Oh, well. Anyway, no, I'm going to go with Ricky Rainey on this one, barring some sort of if Gilbert Smith is able to get some kind of wrestling offensive and begin to break him down, pick him apart with his wrestling and tire him out, or at least not tire him out, but at least sort of break his defenses through that, I don't really see much of an avenue for him to win. So I'm going to go with Rainey on this.
Well, Rainey is currently the underdog, plus 136 to plus 130. Smith, the favorite, minus 170 to minus 164. Maybe an opportunity there. No.
I wouldn't bet on it. It's too much of a gimme.
It's too close. Come on, man.
Yeah, it's too. It's a pretty. It seems like a very close fight between two fairly inconsistent fighters.
Yes.
And that brings us to our first main card bout: Goiti Yamauchi versus Ryan Couture. Vic, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yamauchi has been for quite some time now showing that his Achilles heel has been wrestling. And if he's going to go in there against a guy who is as decent a wrestler as Couture, who's got as good a level of setting up his submissions and chaining them as Couture, then I'm going to have to go with Ryan here. I know that Ryan hasn't done very well, that fight where he got knocked out not too long ago, but I just don't see him getting into that kind of trouble again. When it comes to the stand-up, I really think he'll be able to apply the pressure and eventually, just again, much like we just said with the Gilbert Smith fight, just break him down, and then eventually get the win. Because we saw it happen with the Will Martinez fight. We saw it happen with the Bubba Jenkins fight. Yamauchi just has a problem with guys that can wrestle like that. And sure, you could argue that Couture maybe isn't the athlete that those guys were. But he's still
Couture would argue that he's not the athlete those guys were.
That's actually pretty. He would, because he's got a good sense of humor about it, and he's a bit of a realist when it comes to that. But I mean, look, I don't see Yamauchi finding his chin like that and putting him out. So I'm going to go with Couture on this one.
All right, Eddie, what are your thoughts?
This is interesting. Ryan Couture is such an interesting character, and he's facing a young buck here. Like, he's the old guy in this fight. I never thought that would happen. Like, that's kind of a weird little idiosyncrasy about this matchup. But Couture, he's had a rough road. He's 2-1 in Bellator. 2 submissions right off the bat, both around 3 minutes. Third fight also around 3 minutes. But he got slept. And in the worst way. Like, I was legitimately concerned for the health of Ryan Couture after that fight. And it's not that far. I mean, it wasn't that long ago either. So, I mean, I hope he's, fully healthy as far as his brain goes. And on the other side, you got Goiti Yamauchi, who is 19-3 with 15 submissions, never been finished, 5-2 in Bellator, finished 4 of those 5 wins also. Last fight, he fought Bubba Jenkins, and in the first round, he took Bubba's back for like 4 minutes, and it was probably like the most boring round I've ever seen. Like, they just stood against the cage, and he just had his back, and a whole lot of nothing went on. But in rounds 2 and 3, Bubba was able to hold him down and kind of stifle any submission attempts he had for him. So I kind of wonder how Yamauchi's going to bounce back from that kind of performance. I mean, he got out-grappled, and his thing is grappling. And he's 23, so he's super young. He's still growing and learning. And, we'll find out if he's worked on his wrestling a bit. I think if he stays off his back and prevents Couture from making this a grind, I think he can volume his way to a decision here. But the more I look at this, the more I feel like Yamauchi is not going to necessarily out-grapple Couture, let alone submit him. And I don't see him firing off kicks for, fear of the takedown because he doesn't want to be on his back. And so what is Yamauchi going to, work behind his jab and work his footwork? I can't trust him to do that and keep Ryan Couture off of him. So I'm going to go with Ryan Couture here. I think he's got the tools to get it done, and the style matchup is right up his alley. So I'm going to go Ryan Couture by decision.
Ryan, Couture does have a habit, especially against flashy, unproven prospects or guys that aren't, super elite. Couture has a habit of making fights way more difficult than you expect. He's beat some dudes that, he beat KJ Noons, which is in and of itself, it was a horrible score.
It was a split decision, but
yeah, it was a horrible score, but it was still a fight that KJ Noons could not bring himself to beat Ryan Couture definitively.
Yeah.
Couture, he has a habit of of either getting totally blown out of the water or being much, much tougher than you're going to give him credit for, because you just saw him get totally blown out of the water.
I think that's the case here.
So, yeah, the odds on this fight, he is a large underdog, +1, or reasonably large underdog, +160 to +167. Yamauchi, the favorite, -210 to -190.
Who are you picking, Zane?
I don't know. The tough thing here, I think Yamauchi might win this just by being the better athlete, and being scrappy enough on the ground to hang with Couture. The problem with that is that I would have said the same thing about Dakota Cochran maybe, and Couture choked Cochran out, but Cochran also has a much, I don't know, he has a lot more trouble with submissions and submission defense.
Cochran's crazy, man. He has fought 10 times since that Couture fight?
Yeah.
And that was only March of 2015.
I know. Dude fights all the damn time.
It's crazy.
He's getting paid.
So
Yamauchi might be able to catch him. I just don't see it happening, though, for some reason.
Yeah. The problem partially, too, is that before that Cochran fight, Couture was fighting, he was can crushing his weight. He was padding his record with cans. Fighting dudes like 4-4 Kyle Shafroden and 2-1 Shakir McKillop.
Hey.
And then his first fight in Bellator, Tommy Baganasco, 3-2. There was no reason for Ryan Couture to be taking these fights, frankly. And they were really easy wins. So you kind of discount those, and you've got a surprising win, a decent win over Dakota Cochran, and losses to Ally Quinta, Ross Pearson, and Patricky Freire.
Tommy Baganasco sounds like the guy who doesn't last an episode on Oz. He just comes in and he gets shanked by Adebisi. He's gone.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of picking Yamauchi to just be a better athlete and be able to stay ahead of Couture by being faster than him. Maybe not finish him, but win rounds, perhaps.
Maybe.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm betting on athleticism over actual technical solidity, which can be a mistake. That brings us to Hisaki Katoh versus AJ Matthews, middleweight bout. And Eddie, what are you thinking on this one?
I am excited. Both guys like to stand and bang. Hisaki Katoh, he's 6-2, 6 wins by knockout, the 2 losses by knockout. So, he doesn't do decisions, which I love. AJ Matthews on the other side, he's been knocked out twice his damn self. But on the same token, he's knocking fools out. He's got 6 to his credit. The most impressive, in my opinion, was when he fought Charlie Rader back in 2012. He threw this jab and then went for this leg to body kick, and the dude leaned down into it and just got kicked right in the face, and it was just mwah. It was beautiful. And I know AJ Matthews, I saw him training out in Thailand at Phuket Top Team earlier this year. So I mean, he's really going all in on his striking. He did lose 2 straight. He got knocked out by Anatoly Tokov, and that was rather fast and abrupt. But
Tarkov's a fucking beast, though. Tarkov.
yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And he's gone the distance with Bilal Muhammad, who's pretty damn good. He's in the UFC now. Man, Saki Kato's a wild card. Like I said, I've seen him fight 4 times, and I still have so many questions about him. He's a mystery to me. Like, his ground game is still completely unknown. And what's his style? I mean, we see him be kind of this outfighter versus Joe Schilling, but then we see him fight Melvin Manhoff, and he's being all aggressive and coming in on him. So I still don't even know what his preferred style is. And, not only that, but 2 of those fights were Joe Schilling, and one of them was a kickboxing match. So I have no idea of his MMA capabilities. And I don't know. AJ Matthews will stand in front of you, and he will trade. But he's also there to get hit. And I can definitely see Katoh, staying on the outside and coming in with some blitz of a strike, almost Machida-esque, and putting him away. But on the same token, I can see Katoh getting slumped, like the way he did against Melvin Manhoff. Even though that was kind of an early stoppage, in my opinion. But
and even though AJ Matthews isn't Melvin Manhoff.
For sure. But I mean, he hits hard. Like,
sure.
His punches and his kicks are very hard. But I think if Katoh fights the way he did against Schilling, then, play more of a finesse game, then I think he'll get the victory here. And I think he'll get the finish. So I'm going to pick Katoh, but this could go either way, honestly.
All right, Vic, what are your thoughts?
Well, I am still, much like Eddie, a little confused here, and I guess it's probably part of the fun watching a Hisaki Katoh fight these days. It's like, he is capable of doing amazing and surprising things, yet at the same time, you just don't know if you're going to be priming yourself for a degree of disappointment. I remember his first fight against Joe Schilling. We're sitting here going, "Who's this guy? Some karate dude? Yep, that won't go over well." And he goes out there, and that was the coming out party of the year, probably, for a new fighter hitting the scene, at least internationally. And then, he goes out there against Melvin Manhoff, and instead of doing what he would perhaps be doing best, he decides to go in and have a dogfight with the guy, and he tried to outlast Melvin Manhoff. You might be able to crack him, but he's still Melvin Manhoff. He's going to crack you first. And then that happened. So it's weird because it's like I've picked him to, the times I've picked him to lose, he's gone out there and he's, although both of those times were against Joe Schilling. So, again, hence, here comes that strange thing again. Schilling, being this decorated kickboxer who's known for being super tough, and not only does he beat him in an MMA fight, he beats him in a kickboxing match. And, I mean, if you watch the entirety of that match, Katoh was getting tagged pretty good in some of those exchanges, man. They were both really attacking each other and had some great moments, but that spinning back fist from hell just came out, and it wasn't even an equalizer. It was just like, nope, your energy bar is done. So I got to wonder how he's going to approach this, because the one thing we haven't observed here is that AJ Matthews can wrestle. I don't know how well Katoh is going to be able to defend for 3 rounds against a more diverse attack than perhaps some of the other opposition that he's faced. You're going to be facing body kicks and a lot of press, some of a clinch game. Matthews has definitely dedicated himself more to being more complete. It may not show as much in his record as of late, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take him any more seriously. So I do have to worry about that. I'm going to guess that Katoh's probably the favorite. That being the case, I would still give a look to Matthews winning this fight. I certainly would favor Katoh, but I'm not that surprised.
Who are you picking?
I'm going to go out on a branch here. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to go with Matthews on this one. Just for the fact of being more complete, and we've seen what he can do at his most durable.
I'm picking Katoh just because I find that, especially in fights where guys are willing to strike with somebody like Katoh, somebody who has a really unusual striking base usually ends up having a lot of advantages because guys cannot prepare for them.
Yeah.
And their timing is really weird. They can catch people at really awkward angles. Katoh seems to me like the kind of dude who, if he'd gone into the UFC, he's the kind of guy who would run out 4 wins, before there was finally enough tape for people to start scouting him, and then he'd lose all the rest of his fights and get cut.
Yeah.
He'd end up like 4-0 and then 4-3, and then he'd be gone.
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case for Yair Rodriguez. Is that his name?
Yair is like, there's too much athletic freakness going on there. That might be, but like the fact that he can throw the kind of offense he does for 5 rounds and still like not, he gets tired, but he's still out there like throwing jumping spin kicks in round 5.
Yeah, it's like how you see guys who've been wrestling their whole life, round 5, and they can still blast a double, and you're like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, exactly. Like, Yair's just got some freak speed and athleticism going on that's going to carry him for a long way.
Yeah, and he's not neglecting his grappling either, so that's another thing to look out for too.
Yeah, I don't know, but it could happen to Yair. I mean, I do think he will run into somebody at the elite levels. He's going to run into somebody who can just punch him every time he walks in and drag him to the mat and out wrestle him. But that might be a title fight that happens, So the odds on this fight, Katoh is the favorite, -180 to -170, and Matthews the underdog, +130 to +155. I don't really have any problem with those odds, but yeah, I mean, Matthews could be worth a look. Kato's no kind of complete fighter. I have a pretty good idea of what his ground game looks like. It's probably just really bad.
I'm surprised they're that close. I think they're right where they should be, but I'm surprised with Katoh, with his 2 wins over Schilling, he's not valued a little more. I wonder if there's money in on Matthews.
Maybe. It's an interesting fight, definitely. That brings us to our co-main event, Bobby Lashley versus Josh Appelt. Vic, tell me about future heavyweight champ Bobby Lashley here.
Hold on. He's got to get past Czech Congo first. And let me tell you, that's going to be a fight to remember when it happens. Oh, Christ. No, I just felt the air just get sucked out of this whole thing. All right, so I want to just focus briefly on Josh Appelt here for a moment. 12-5. If you haven't seen him fight before, he's been something of a mainstay out on the West Coast. He had a handful of fights at the beginning of his career out in Gladiator Challenge. We're not going to really hold that against him too much. He moved up to some respectable. Well, no, listen. I mean, we have discussed this here. Gladiator Challenge. If you're in there for more than 4 or 5 fights, everything a suspect. Now, given that he is a heavyweight, and it's hard to find fights for some of these guys. Like, I'm willing to give him a little more leeway because he's acquitted himself well after that. Not to the Derek Anderson level, but well enough to say, okay, he's fighting guys from a couple of other places, and he's done okay for himself. And even though he's had a few losses here and there, he's very clearly hit a very well-defined ceiling, and there's no shame in that. That's just simply part of what happens. It's a fight game, and it's unforgiving. Very much dependent on his wrestling, on control, on pounding guys from there, and just really making his opponent quit, and just grinding out some decisions here and there. It's not a bad record. It's a lot of punches and a couple of chokes here and there. Bobby Lashley is a goddamn freak in nature. This is not going to look, and this is the worst thing about watching Bobby Lashley fight. It doesn't even seem real because you're looking at a guy who is built like an action figure, and he's fighting a whole bunch of doughy dudes who might have a little bit of musculature or whatever. And I understand that looks aren't everything, but it plays out kind of like that in so many of these fights where he just goes in there. He's clearly the better athlete. Surprisingly, his cardio has held up a lot better as of late. Not that he needs it too much because he's finishing these guys relatively quickly, even if the fights aren't pretty. Both of these guys fight pretty damn ugly. All right, there's going to be some wrestling. There's going to be a little leaning on the cage. There's going to be some short punches. And someone's going to get knocked out with like a random elbow that's probably accidental. That person is most likely going to be Appelt. So, yeah, bet the house on Bobby Lashley. Or don't, because it's a heavyweight fight. And you know what? You never know what the hell's going to happen. So, yeah. If
don't bet anybody's house on Bobby Lashley.
No, even if it's made out of cardboard. Just look, guys, stay the hell away from it like the plague if you're betting. But still, Bobby Lashley should be able to win this.
All right, Eddie, what are your thoughts? You're muted, man.
Oh, that might have been for the better. But Oh man, I just don't even know, man. Scrubs, bums, cans, and bobos. That is who Bobby Lashley has been fighting. I just don't know what they're doing. Like, what is he doing? He's 40 years old. He looks great, but like every fight kind of looks the same. I just like, what are they doing with him? Like, how are you slow? Like, I guess it's just tough for me to watch. It's like I want to see him against quality talent, and I could reel off 10 other guys that I would rather see him fight than Josh Appelt. No disrespect to Josh Appelt. He's 3-1 in Bellator. More power to the dude. The juggernaut. He hits hard. He comes forward. I like the dude, but come on now. Like, why is Lashley not fighting way better people? And like, I saw a recent interview with him, and he was like, "Oh, well, I was off for 11 months, and ring rust is real." And I'm like, 11 months? Like, are you kidding me, man? Like, go fight someone of a certain caliber and find out where you stand. But they don't want to, cash in on that cash cow just yet. So I guess I get it, but I'm just disappointed.
Well, I'm sorry to butt in here, but a lot of that has to do with the cross promotion that they were still trying to attempt with TNA. And now that TNA, I don't believe, is on Spike anymore, that's kind of up in smoke. And it was never really that successful to begin with, as we saw with Rampage and King Mo and Tito. It just never really got off the ground. There's too many moving pieces for that to work. So, I mean, if you've seen Bobby Lashley, whether you've seen him in professional wrestling or not is kind of immaterial to this whole thing anyway. If you've seen him fight in MMA and you respect that freak show thing, then you're going to watch him fight in MMA, and that's that. There's no real need for it. It's kind of an artificial thing.
Yeah, I'm picking him, of course, but I'm just over it, I guess.
Yeah, he has a very Mark Kerr vibe for me, in that like he's huge and he's muscular and he hurts people enough to break them. But when you watch him, and I watched a Mark Kerr fight today, so this is also why this is at the front of my mind. When you're watching it, you're not actually sure how he's breaking this guy.
Yeah.
Like any one strike he throws, no matter how awkward or ugly, has so much potential power behind it that the ugliest shit just like wrecks somebody. Like, how did that guy just get not? Why is that guy bleeding now? I don't understand. That's very much the Bobby Lashley vibe too.
Yeah, I can see that.
The Mark Kerr fight was especially fun because you could see a lot of how he was hurting the dude was he just put his forehead on the guy and then posture up and lean his forehead into their face and just start rubbing his head back and forth in their eyes. That was a very good
smashing machine.
Yeah.
He admitted in the Smashing Machine that like if an opponent had an open cut, he'd stick his fingers in. A lot of that stuff that was happening in the mid '90s Vale Tudo days, that when it was basically, guys were allowed to wear wrestling shoes and maybe a horseshoe. Yeah. But I mean, it's especially curious in the Bobby Lashley case because I mean, here's a guy who was all state in Kansas in what was it, high school, I think. I mean, he was, he was military champ in wrestling. I mean, like, I don't understand how that doesn't really. You'd expect someone who's got that kind of wrestling background to have it translate a certain way into MMA, and it hasn't had that effect at all.
Yeah, we see plenty of wrestlers who don't translate, though. It's, being really good, especially kind of heavyweight wrestling. I'm not saying those guys aren't amazing technicians, and some of them certainly are, but we see a lot of, like, especially, like, below the NCAA level, a lot of heavyweight wrestlers, like, you were just the biggest dude around in front of anybody, and, like, you go watch your tape on these guys, and it's like, yeah, you just ran that dude over. I mean... like,
well, you kind of wonder what happens when that doesn't work or when it doesn't play out. Like, you got a guy like a Steve Mocco who, can't take anything away. All the respect in the world for him as a wrestler, but Jesus, as far as MMA goes, it ain't looking too great.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a different sport. It really is. It'll be interesting to see what Bilal Makov does in the UFC because that's going to be a hell of a jump into the Shark Tank. That brings us to our odds. So let's see. Bobby Lashley is the favorite, deservedly so, minus 390 to minus 370, or minus 400 to minus 375. Appelt, the underdog, plus 313 down to plus 270.
Any prop bets for that?
Prop bets. Let's see. The only one is over a round and a half or under a round and a half. So
I'd expect more. I expect more in the morning.
If you go under a round and a half, it's plus 130. Over a round and a half, minus 160. I don't know that I'd actually expect many more prop bets out of a Bellator card, frankly. But I don't know, man. This is exactly the kind of thing I wouldn't bet on as well, just because, the Bobby Lashley's the dude who lost to Chad Griggs and James Thompson.
Well, he's fixed a lot of that, though. I mean, I don't know.
He has fixed a lot of that. He's a lot better. He should absolutely beat Josh Appelt. I'm just saying at heavyweight, you don't have to screw up that badly. And Bobby Lashley's not so good that he can afford to screw up.
No.
That brings us to our main event: Alexander Shlemenko versus Kendall Grove. Let's see. Is this Eddie? Yes, Eddie. What's your thoughts on this?
This is odd. Definitely a different matchup. Alexander Shlemenko is coming off of a suspension that he popped for after the Melvin Manhoff fight. I think it was after. It was a post-fight test. But, he was suspended by the California State Athletic Commission. So he was like, okay, cool, I'll go fight in M1 over in Russia. So that's what he did, and didn't look exactly great over there, to be quite honest. He fought the same guy twice and ended up catching him in a guillotine in their second fight, which was a war. I mean, an absolute dog fight.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you got Kendall Grove, who, he was in the Ultimate Fighter, UFC back in the day, kind of didn't do so well towards the end of that, kind of having this new resurgence in Bellator, fell short against Halsey, and actually came out in his last fight and slept somebody, which, surprised
he has 2
me.
knockouts in a row right now.
Yeah. He's kind of finding his range, in his later career, which I am so glad to see. Like, good on him for finally putting it together after all this time. He's like realizing he's tall. And, good on him. He's been fighting since 2003. Shlemenko's been fighting since 2004. So between the two of them, they have 101 fights. And that is a lot of experience in there.
And they're both still in their early 30s, which shocks the hell out of me.
Yeah.
They're in their early 30s, but I think it's fair to say they're past their prime.
Oh, yeah. Well, they've got a shit ton of cage wear on them.
So Kendall fights Francisco France and backs him up to the cage and just starts throwing a couple overhand rights and just slumped him. And I thought that was kind of out of character for, Kendall Grove. But I definitely like to see that. I don't think I can trust Kendall to keep his range against Shlemenko. But, I mean, there's a chance he could connect in the same way he did with France up against the cage and put Shlemenko down. But on the same token, Shlemenko can make it such a dogfight that he forces Kendall Grove to make a mistake that he can just pounce on, which he's great at doing. But on the same token, in that chaos, I feel like he can get caught in a submission, which he's great at doing. So Kendall could, put him to sleep. But on the same token, he's not really physically opposing enough. Kendall's not physically opposing enough like these other guys. Like, a lot of people almost beat Shlemenko, but the ones that actually put him away are really physically imposing. So, I don't know. I don't like picking guys coming off a suspension, but I can just see Shlemenko being crazy enough to overwhelm Kendall at some point in this. So I'm going to pick Shlemenko here. I'm going to go with a TKO in the second round because why the fuck not?
All right, Vic. How many tokens you got for me, Vic?
Not nearly enough. Okay. First off, yeah, he did. Shlemenko did have that suspension after the Manhoef fight. Regardless, he did fight Vyacheslav Vasilevsky, who is really goddamn scary. So that's really, if anything, I wouldn't put too much stock into how bad he looked there, given the fact that he fought a guy who was very legit outside of the UFC. I had those 2 fights. His last bout was back in June. So despite the suspension, he did remain relatively active. And at 4 months, that's not a bad turnaround. So he still should have his engine, his engine should still be warm. That said, man, he's got so much ring time on him, as you just mentioned. Like, I can understand Kendall Grove to a degree, but I look at Shlemenko and I think, damn, how the hell am I older than that guy? I mean, he's starting to look old in some of these fights, and it's not working in his favor. Now, granted, he's one of those guys who can turn the fight around with one thing, whether it's one punch, one leg kick, one clinching exchange or something like that. He's certainly not going to be hunting for the takedown, but he will still be able to snatch a submission wherever he can find one, try to, batter the opponent's body with knees if it's available. That's kind of been his sort of go-to in that department outside of his striking. There's not too many layers to his game, but the layers that are present, what you can observe, he's pretty damn good at some of those things, and he's pretty good at making his opponent keep them guessing as to what he's going to be able to do next. That said, Kendall Grove, he's hitting his stride. He's fighting long. He's still crafty as ever. Athleticism is a hard thing to measure because of how multi-directional it is, but I would venture a guess that, Grove is still the kind of lanky, flexible guy who's still able to push a pace. He's not going to get worn out due to cardio or anything like that. So I guess I'm going to have to go with Grove here, also because of the grappling. I mean, just Shlemenko, all things considered, and we're not even going to get into how the hell he got back into the good graces of fighting into the U.S. again, but I can't trust him at this point. The Vasilevsky fights were what they were, but against someone like Grove, who's just really operating at a different level now, and seeing how Shlemenko's kind of petering out at this point, I don't really think that he's someone that I can trust. So I'm going to go with Grove on this one.
I want to believe you're right. I want to believe it's true. I'm still going with Shlemenko here. He's too crafty. Like, that's the thing with Shlemenko, is that he's not only is he a really experienced fighter, but he's a really experienced fighter who's turned that into being a really crafty fighter. Like, he may not ever be a more technically diverse fighter. He may never be a great wrestler or a great grappler, but he knows how to draw people into these little striking tricks that he can knock somebody out with any one shot at random. He's great at drawing people into it, and I think Grove is going to give him too much of the fight he wants. So
I can see that.
I'm picking Shlemenko here myself. The odds on this, Shlemenko is a pretty large favorite, which is actually a little surprising to me. Shlemenko is favorite -250 to -280. And Grove, the underdog, +219 to +200.
I wonder if a bunch of Russians have been betting on Shlemenko.
Maybe. Because, Vasilevsky that's a good, those are solid fights. Those are good names. But, both these dudes have a ton of cage wear, and we are at the 0 point where wheels will be falling off at any time. So
this is the 16th Bellator fight for Shlemenko.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I think this deserves to be much more in the ±1 to 200 range.
Yeah, that's fair.
That sounds right.
On that note, any final thoughts on this Bellator card before we close out here?
Yeah. I mean, it's at least it's decent enough to have some divisional relevance and all that. I just want to add two minor notes. There will be an M1 event this weekend, as well as ACB, Berkut Challenge, whatever they call themselves. So that could be fun too. A lot of pretty interesting names on that as well. A little shameless self-promotion. Yes, there will be more episodes of Bodega Superstar Podcast as of this weekend. So that's going to be fun too. And Eddie Mercado, I don't know. I'm dry here, man. I'm waiting for you to promote your shit. What's going on? I haven't heard you go at it.
All right, first of all, vote. Get out and vote. November 8th. Vote. So
unless you're voting for Gary Johnson, then you might as well just stay home. Don't do that.
As long as you vote because you legitimately want to pick someone and you're not just picking against someone else.
No. But just vote because we need all the regional races too. There's a lot more to vote for than just president. Vote.
There
Yes.
you have it.
Yes, local legislatures matter. Thank you.
But back to fighting. Next Bellator 163 is going to be in Uncasville, Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun. I will be in attendance. Come say hello, but don't be weird. It's going to be good. Liam McGeary's taking on Phil Davis for the 205 title. Should be an interesting matchup. And there will be a preview out for this Bellator tomorrow before the event. So.
All right. Well, on that note, you can find me on Twitter at DZaneSimon. You can find Eddie on Twitter at the Eddie No Weird Dudes Mercado. You can find Vic on Twitter at Vic M Rodriguez. You can find all three of us at BloodyElbow.com. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will be back next week with our regular run of Knuckle Up, If I Did It, Heavy Hands. I'll be doing an episode of MMA Cross Promotion and whatever other shows people want to produce. So stay tuned to MMANation.com. Give this show a like. That's a thumbs up down below. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in.